Hi there, Glocal Citizens. Welcome back to the podcast that inspires a borderless mindset around manifesting a new world. I'm your host, Florence Sidhu, and I feel like a Glocal Citizen today. I've just landed straight from the airport to meet my guest for today. I won't talk about where I went just yet because I will have some guests that will be coming from that place. So I'm leaving some surprise and suspense for you listeners out there. My guest today is it's so interesting because I'm looking at her bright, sunny windows and I'm looking out at the growing moon in the sky. So we're really taking a whirlwind trip around the globe today. So my next guest is an author, speaker, TV host, and certified 500-hour Manasa yoga instructor with over 20 years of teaching experience in the field of yoga. She's based in Malaysia, and she's the founder of the Mat and Beyond Yoga Studio in Puchong, Selangor. I think I said that right. I hope. Puchong, Selangor. Her book on yoga, Yoga Shakti, Awaken Your Power, was published in May of 2018. And she's been a writer for more than 20 years, editing newspapers locally and in the region where she's from, Malaysia. And she also hosts the weekly show Yoga Shakti on Anand TV, based in the UK, with audiences in Europe, North America, and New Zealand. Shailaja Menon, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for that, Florence. And I'm very happy to have this opportunity to talk to you and your wonderful audience.
Wonderful. So let's get started. Let's talk about where you're from, where you're local, and what is your craft.
Okay, so when you go back to my ancestors, they're actually from a state in South India called Kerala, and our mother tongue is a language called Malayalam. And I grew up, though, in a neighboring state called Tamil Nadu and in a city called Coimbatore. So basically, I am local both in India, where I grew up, and I go back to very frequently. And now, for the last 25 years, I have been living in Malaysia. So definitely my home is here as well. And my yoga studio is here. My kids grew up here. So I'm local in Malaysia as well. So I think I have two homes now, both in India and in Malaysia. And as for my craft, what I do is teach, speak, and write about yoga on a very regular basis. And that's what I've been doing over the last 20 years or so. I started actually when my older son was born and he was only 6 months old. And I think today he's 23 years old.
Oh,
So
wow.
it's been a long journey. But more than anything else, I really got into yoga for my own self. It wasn't about teaching or it wasn't about writing. It was really for my own sanity, so to say.
Yeah. Yeah.
And then when I found it so powerful, I was so interested in it. And it was almost kind of, answers to all these questions that I have been seeking for so long, ever since my childhood. And when I found that, I kind of dived into it, became a teacher, shared it with my students. And it was so powerful because so many of my students would come back to me about how the practice had shaped their lives. And, all of that helped me to continue on. And then I started, I've been a writer as well for even before I went into yoga. So at some point, both of them just came together and I started writing, and then the speaking happened along the way.
So how did you end up living, working, and playing in Malaysia?
Yeah, so I moved to Malaysia actually after I got married. And my husband is based in Malaysia, so I moved to Malaysia. Yeah, that's how
Okay.
I came to be here.
Okay.
Yeah.
So by marriage.
Yeah.
Your children are Malaysian by marriage. So you moved to Malaysia and you split your time between the two places, and you just to find your sanity, you decided, okay, I need you. But why did you turn to yoga as opposed to any other kind of practice? Like, what particularly about yoga opened the door for you?
Well, I guess when you grow up in India, you can't escape yoga. So yoga is
Yes.
always, whether you do it or not, yoga is part of your vocabulary.
Uh-huh.
And I have been dabbling with yoga from young. I think I've always been interested. I actually did meditation courses even when I was in college. And I also was very influenced by my uncle, who is actually the father of another guest that you had recently, Jayakumar Menon. Yeah, so
Okay.
my uncle is actually one of the first people I noticed who practiced yoga, as we practice it today, in the sense like he used it everywhere, not just on a mat.
Mm.
And I would see him, when if there were some kind of difficult situations, I would watch him sitting on a chair, closing his eyes, breathing deeply. And I watched all of this growing up, and so that was always an option in my mind to go into these kind of practices.
Mm-hmm.
So when I used to be plagued by head, I think we had like a family hereditary kind of thing. My father had migraines, and I had migraines, and that these my father would always say that I had very low tolerance for stress, and I would always have these stress headaches. So he said, nothing wrong with me, you have to learn to manage your stress. It was something I heard from him from very young. So then it was just like yoga was the natural option. And like I said, I've been dabbling with it even from my college days. And then like 20 years ago, I took a deep plunge into it. And like the first practice that I did, the first asana class that I went to, at the end of the practice, it was like a light had been switched on. It
Mm.
was actually an integral yoga class. I think integral yoga is quite popular in America. And they had this
Mhm.
one center in Coimbatore because Swami Sachidananda actually came from Coimbatore. And it was in one of those classes that I met also somebody called Mataji, who, I mean, I call her as Mataji, but Swami Divyananda. And she was a really wonderful person. And her whole persona attracted to me, very kind, very patient, very loving. And I think I was led along the path in that way. I met many people who inspired me in such a manner. I came to Malaysia, and I also found my teacher, Manoj Kaimal, who, like, I've done the 500-hour, Manasa Yoga teacher training. And I love that because, even when you say yoga, there are so many different styles of yoga.
Right, right,
Yeah.
exactly.
So
Yeah.
this, my teacher Manoj, he taught in a way that was very mind oriented,
Mm.
which was exactly what I was looking for. Like everybody has different needs, right? And I was always looking for a way, like to release stress, to manage my mind. So this kind of style really appealed to me. And I found it beautiful in the way he integrated philosophy into the practice. So usually asana class are very physically oriented. It's only about
Yeah.
stretching your hamstrings or strengthening your core. But
Mhm.
he brought in all the beautiful scriptures and philosophies of the yoga, which are the Patanjali Yoga Sutras, and then he talked about the Bhagavad Gita. So all of the scriptures came into the seemingly physical practice, and that was very beautiful for the mind, because at the end of the class, you not just left with your mind relaxed, but you also felt that beautiful elevation, of your mind. It was, though there is what they call somatopsyche release that happens, right? When you work with your body, you do find a release in your mind.
Mhm.
But besides that, because you're listening to the scriptures,
Mm.
right? You're also elevated as you leave the practice, and you're able to deal with the same situation, the same life situation that you left before you entered the class. You're able to deal with it in a completely different perspective when you leave the class, just because your mind has expanded a little bit through the class, through the listening of all of these scriptures. So I found that very powerful, which is why I went on to continue to teach, to learn and become a teacher in that style. And I teach in a similar manner, incorporating the philosophy into the practice.
Mhm, mhm. So I spent half of my life in Ghana,
Yeah.
and I feel like in Ghana, a friend of mine has a studio. She's also been a guest before. And there's been in the almost 10 years that I've been there, and I've practiced yoga for many, many, many years. And I came to it as a physical, right? I was a runner, an athlete for a long
Okay.
time. So yoga was like, oh, okay, I can continue and be better at focused stretching. And so I did that for a while, and I always felt better. I think my temperament is fairly calm. So I don't believe that have, but there was a time when I was having a lot of stress in my life, and I went to Bikram yoga. So that was, because it was more athletic, but I got really into, and I started to feel the mental elevation in that as well. But it was really the physical release that was happening. But that led me, and I think that doing that and becoming injured from doing that. Like, so what happened to me is that I did Bikram for like a full year, just committed. That was the only yoga that I was doing. And then a friend invited me to a simple vinyasa class, and Bikram has the many different stretches that you build up to. And so the vinyasa class had a camel position, a back bend. And I'm long, my back bends well. So I did it in the regular class, got home, and my back was locked. And so that started me on a whole, even to this day, my back is sometimes great and sometimes not so great. But I say that because by having that injury, it led me into the more, I want to say, spiritual side of
Yep.
understanding what yoga is. But to
Right.
this day, when I take a class, there are very few, except for when I've gone to India and had, like real training, the real spiritual infusion into the class. And so, do you think that it is because of religion, so to speak, that is the reason why, you're getting less of the spiritual, which is the kind of holisticness of it? That's more of what's been spread, or is it just kind of just different teachers do different things? What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I really believe that, like even Swami Satchidananda used to say that the body is the easiest thing to connect with. So asanas are like the
Mm,
calling card. Yeah. So
mm,
everybody
mhm.
goes because you feel an instant release,
Right,
right? When you
right.
just, do a class, at the end of the class, you are going to feel good just by the simple fact that you worked your body, right? You
Yeah.
released tight muscles and you brought in some flexibility and mobility into your joints and you've strengthened your body. So you are going to feel that elevation at the end of the class. So the body is the easiest thing to work with, right? So
Mm,
the whole
mhm,
path of yoga, they say, is from the gross to the subtle. Yeah. So we always start with the gross, which is the body, right? Because
mhm,
it's easy to connect with. It's tangible. You can touch it, you can feel it, you can work with it, right? So that is what it comes easily to everybody. And then when we work into subtler aspects of ourselves, like say to work on the breath,
mhm,
right? Or to work on the mind. All of that requires a deep focus and concentration and commitment, which is harder than simply like you can wear your earphones and stretch your
mhm,
body, right? But if you need to focus on your breath and count your breath, if you need to really be aware of your mind, if you need to watch the modulations of your mind, all of that requires more intense focus. So it's not everybody's cup of tea. That's what I would say. So just working with your body is something most people enjoy. But to go into those higher aspects of the yoga practice, which is about consciously working with your breath, which is about being more aware of your mind and taking the practice from, the mat to your everyday life. And to be eventually the practice is about really viewing life through that yoga philosophy. To bring in all those aspects of, we talked about the 8 limbs of yoga, the Ashtanga yoga, and they have all of these different beautiful principles of yamas and niyamas, which is like truthfulness, honesty. So to live life through that lens is actually a much deeper commitment, and it may not be for everybody.
mhm, mhm. Understood, understood.
Yeah, but the body and the body work is easy and it's more connectable and relatable.
It is, most definitely. And it's a door opener, which is a good thing as well.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah.
So you decided you were interested, you studied and found all of these wonderful mentors and teachers. And so, when did it become a business for you? When did you decide, okay, I think this is where my life is calling me and I'm going to open a studio or what have you? When did it and how did it become a business for you?
I just started teaching initially. So I got my teacher's training certificate. I first certified with integral yoga. And then when I went back to Malaysia, they didn't have an integral yoga center in Malaysia. And then I met my teacher, Manoj Kaimal, who taught Manasa Yoga. So then I learned with him and I became certified with him. So then opportunities came to start teaching. So for many years, I just taught it as a freelance teacher
Okay.
because I had young children as well. And I was not interested in the commitment that it required to set up a studio. But over a period of time, I realized that as a freelance teacher, you don't really grow your students. As in,
Mm-hmm.
you realize that, people come, people go, and you don't really see them growing as much. But whereas if you had a studio, you have the same people coming and you see them develop and deepen their practice over a period of time. So at some point when, and I have these, I'm shuttling between India, my parents were in India and I had to keep making these trips. So the idea of starting a studio was actually quite daunting. I wasn't up to the commitment for many years. Then about, I would say about 10 or 9 years ago, when my second son started school and I felt relatively free to take up that commitment, I actually said the only thing was Malaysia is very famous for its long distances and traffic jams. So the only thing I said was it has to be like 5 minutes from my house, and that's it. So yeah, over a period of time, I set up my studio, which was just very close to my house, and it fits into my lifestyle. And I just, whoever can make it there, I teach.
Okay.
Now, of course, it's a little bit online as well. When the pandemic happened,
Right.
and I teach in other places as well. I have some students in the UK, and I actually teach a class in the US as well. Yeah, so the online world has opened up more opportunities to teach. But yeah, I would say, just organically grew over a period of time.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm. In your studio, are you the teacher? Do you train other teachers? How are you
No, I
operationalizing?
just, I'm the only teacher there. And if my students, I have a few students who have actually gone on to want to become teachers, but they
Mm-hmm.
train with my teacher who's also currently based in Malaysia, Manoj Kaimal. So they train with him.
Oh,
But
okay.
yeah,
Nice. It sounds like a very, very yogi lifestyle.
I am not sure what a yogi lifestyle is, but yeah, that's my life.
Right. Well, I get a sense of real community because I really like that you said that part of the reason why you wanted to have a studio is that you can grow your students. And so I think that that's a great way to show that you're making impact,
Yeah,
like really seeing
yeah,
someone move through
yeah,
practice and,
yeah,
and become. I call myself a lifelong student.
absolutely.
And so, yeah, I like that concept.
Yeah, and it has been very fulfilling as well, because I've
Mhm,
had a lot of students come in. Like, I always feel like, the mind, manas itself, stands for the mind.
mhm,
So the whole focus of the yoga practice is the mind. So and I also feel like today, not just today, but even before the pandemic hit, like mental health is really a big deal. And after the pandemic, it's become an even bigger deal. And really a pressing need of our time is to learn how to manage our minds. And
mhm,
before we can even manage it, we have to be aware of it, and we have to shine the light on it. And that comes through a yoga class. And that is what I'm most fulfilled about, is to see my students, come in with a lot of issues like anxiety attacks, panic attacks, right? And life can deal you, some harsh blows as well, miscarriages.
mhm,
But to see how the practice, their commitment to the practice, I would say, has restored them in many ways, healed them, and helped them to carry on with their lives in a much more fulfilled and satisfying manner. So that
mhm,
has really
mhm.
been the gift of the, opening the studio and having people with me on a long-term basis.
Nice, nice. And probably also feeds into your writing,
Yeah,
which
absolutely.
particularly your book. Yeah. Before I ask you that, I wanted to, because you mentioned, traffic jams where you are. And so this is where I want to ask you my Glocal Speak question. So we want to know, or we want to hear what you hear. So I ask you to share a word, a phrase, or a saying that is a meaningful part of your local experience and why or how you came to value it as Glocal Speak.
Okay, so this is the hard one for me. So, yeah, eventually everything I answer will have a philosophical tinge to it. But yeah, so there's a very, the language, local language here is Malay.
Yes.
And there's a very interesting phrase which is often used, and it's just like tapa. So it's like, and they have a very sing-song way of using it, right? So I don't say that I'm saying it in the best possible manner, but it's like tapa la, like, just relax, just it's okay, everything's okay.
Ah, okay, okay,
So, I
okay.
mean, for me, I mean, that's really a very big word, this okay. Because to me,
Yes.
even the yoga practice eventually is about being okay with whatever comes up, shows up in your life,
Mhm,
right? It's about acceptance. It's about, even there's a very famous philosopher in India called J. Krishnamurti, and he also says ultimately the practice is just being okay with everything.
mhm,
So, though it has a way, yeah, so it's supposed to be a fun question, I know.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
Yeah,
mhm.
so I like that phrase.
Okay,
and
okay. I
just
like.
and just saying it kind of just brings down the stress level and just calms you down. Like it's okay.
Well, I love that you said that because there are so many different. So when I listen and hear other languages, there are certain words that just sound the way that they sound on your
Yeah.
tongue and in the
Yeah.
ether. It's like,
Yeah.
so it has to be, yeah, I
Yeah.
like that. So tapala, or is it tapa?
Yeah.
Okay.
It's the, so it's tapa.
Ta-
Yeah. Tapa
Tapa,
la. Yeah.
tapala.
Yeah.
Okay, okay. We're learning some
La
Malay
la is
today.
just, yeah. So la is just like, it just uses every word is la. Hi la,
Oh, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Okay, okay, okay. But it's
Yeah.
tapa.
Yeah.
Okay,
Yeah.
okay, okay. Nice, nice. And so do you speak Malay?
A little bit.
Okay, so
Yeah, I do.
you picked up
Yeah.
pieces.
I picked up pieces. Yeah.
Okay. And how
Yeah.
about your children? Do they speak
Yeah, they do. They
growing up
have to
they're
learn.
fluent
Yeah, they
speakers?
have to
Yeah.
learn in school as well. So they learn how to read and write it as well as a language. They
Okay.
have to learn it
Yeah.
as a language as well. Yeah, as they're
Okay.
Malaysian citizens, it's compulsory.
Right.
Yeah, so they do
Right.
speak.
Right. Very interesting.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Okay. So talking about your book and writing in language, tell us what inspired you to sit down and write a book, and just what has that journey been like, and how have you been experiencing being a book author?
So I think human beings are wired differently, and I'm just wired with words in my head.
Mm,
So I have these, like, if you ask me what is really something I would just like to do, is just sit with my laptop and write. Because over these many years of practice, I think I have, learned so much, and I have gained so much knowledge. And, a lot of it is also, there's a term in yoga which says swadhyaya, which is self study. So not all of it is from other people, but also through my own journey and through the infusion of the yoga into the journey, I've had, so many insights, and it has, and a lot of them have helped my life. So I think I was writing even before that. So at some point, the writing and the yoga teaching came together, and that became a book. And I've really enjoyed. In fact, I've also written my second book, and that is on meditation, and talking about meditation through the context of the Ashtanga Yoga, the 8 limbs of yoga. And I hope to get it published sometime soon. And I already have a third book in my head, which the words are all there, the chapters are all there. So I think writing is just something that comes very naturally to me, and it's a
mhm.
beautiful flow. Like, you just, you go into another dimension of being as you write, because it's just words coming through you. And
Yeah.
I absolutely enjoy and cherish, and I'm grateful for this gift of being able to write. Yeah. So I think just a deep desire to communicate
Mhm.
everything that I know. And since my gift per se is words, so then I think it just translated into that.
Mhm.
So that's
Mhm.
how the writing happened. Because, and also, like, there's a lot of conceptions, misconceptions, right? Even about yoga, even in India, sometimes it's just asanas are just viewed as an exercise. So all of that, I wanted to be able to address it. So a book gave you an opportunity to express, what you have learned and what has helped you, and it's your unique voice. So since I had very strong, I'm very passionate about it, I think it just had to express.
Mhm, mhm. So the title Yoga Shakti,
Yeah.
explain to us the Shakti part of it.
Yeah. So Shakti is power, right? So to me, what yoga is really is an empowerment. Like, none of us are, especially I think now maybe it's different, but as we grow up, to me, the most important aspect is our own minds, because we live in our minds, right? The mind in itself, in Vedanta, there's a phrase that says the mind in itself can make a hell out of heaven or a heaven out of hell. So our life is really dependent on the state of our minds, right? Our minds are depressed. How are you? I'm depressed. If our minds are anxious, how are you? I'm anxious, right? And then over a period of time, we build our identity over that. Somebody asks you, tell me something about yourself. You say, oh, I have depression. Or somebody asks you, tell me something about yourself. You say, I have anxiety, right? Over a period of time, that becomes our identity.
Mhm,
So the need to manage our minds is a key aspect, which I feel has been very overlooked.
mhm.
And to me, this is something that should be taught right in school, like we learn subjects like math and science. I believe
Exactly.
more important than that is the knowledge of our own selves. to know that
Mhm.
how our mind, body, breath, energy, all of that is connected.
Mhm.
How, if you can learn to work one, you can actually positively influence all of it. And how, the mind being involved is the key to all of this consciousness, awareness. These are what the yoga practice teach you, to be able
Mhm.
to observe where is your mind, what is your mind thinking about, what is your mind obsessing about, right?
Mhm.
Learning to channel your mind. Can you direct your mind, right, to your feet? Become aware of your feet, direct your mind to your sit bone, right? What is the emotional state of your mind? And then what is the energy that your mind holds? These are all the questions that the yoga practice brings up. And as we learn all of this, we're actually connecting deeper to ourselves. And
Mhm.
then those insights that we gain help us to manage our minds. So if we know that every time a certain person, or we meet a certain person, right, our whole stress level goes up, and, we're starting to get anxiety attacks, right? If we can notice that and observe that, right? Objectively observing is the key, right? Awareness. So if we can just observe it without judging ourselves, then, we have the capacity to take different decisions. But most of the time, we are only flowing with life.
Mhm.
So that's what yoga gives you, that awareness to just see things. And then you make decisions whether this is helping you or this is not helping you, whether this is, healthy or this is not healthy, right? So that for me is really what I try to share through my books and everything, to shine the light on the mind and to learn how to manage the mind. And now this is all science today, the knowledge of the breath. So they know that the breath and the mind and the body are all connected. So if you learn to breathe deeply, you learn different techniques of breathing, which is what pranayama gives you. You learn to manage your anxiety, you learn to manage your panic, you learn to lift yourself, right? A lot of people, when we say mental health, it's not just schizophrenia or some disorder like that. It is just being able to wake up feeling good, right? It is able to have some enthusiasm. It is being able to smile. It is being able to laugh, which all of this, some days we just can't, because the mind is not in a good place and the mind is in a very dark place. And then situations happen, right? Life deals very severe blows, right? I always say relationships are a huge, area where people's minds can get really disturbed. So we have to learn how to lift it. So if we understand that through the body, through consciously working with the body in asana practice, by consciously managing, working with our breath in pranayama practice, we have the capacity to shift our minds into a better place. And that for me is what I try to communicate through my books, through my teaching, because in
Mhm.
my own life, that has been my struggle with my own mind as well.
Sure.
So this has been like a magic pill. It's like, oh,
Right.
that's really great. At the end of the yoga class, by stretching your body, you can feel so good. And, by working with your breath, you can really shift your mind into a completely different dimension.
Sure.
By chant, right? So there are so many different tools of the yoga practice. Besides asana, pranayama, there's also chanting, which is so beautiful.
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
like we were talking earlier, right? Like words. So instead of just saying sa, if you can say sa, that itself is
Mm.
so calming, right? So
Right.
chanting brings us that.
So I think kind of what you're getting at in a little bit of ways is just ways, so particularly with the words, is this vibration, right? So when you say certain words or say certain things, like you're vibrating that, and I think where we are not aware, or many people are not aware unless they've kind of journeyed or maybe had some intuition around it, is this understanding that the more aware you are, the more the general power, like you said, like you just have that, you're that much more empowered to be able to put yourself in the positions and in the moods and in the places that uplift your spirit or just make your life that much easier. But the question I have though is, everyone wants to feel better. Well, maybe not everyone, but most people want to feel
Absolutely.
better. What are some of your ideas or tips or techniques that you use to help people to be more disciplined about it? Because I find that what the challenge is that people want to, but they can't seem to break into the discipline side of committing to something.
Yeah. I think the key is to fall in love.
Mm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm, mm-hmm,
So I started my yoga practice like some 22 years ago, 23 almost. But what has kept me going day after day is that I love the feeling that it leaves me. I love the person that it makes me as well. right?
Mhm,
So when
mhm,
my students are doing their class, I tell them, feel it. It's not just doing something mechanically, but feel the bit, like even relaxation. You can actually feel after you've stretched and then you lie down, you feel your muscles relax. You feel the mind release and you fall in love with those sensations. And then you become a better person. You always leave the class feeling more grounded, more centered. And then that's how you want to be. So this gives you the tools to be the person that you want to be, more grounded, more centered, calmer, right? The ability to just not be so reactive, the ability to be a bit more flexible. So I will say flexibility is not just about the body, right? Eventually, all of this translates into the mind. So when you
mhm,
fall in love
mhm.
with the practice and how it makes you feel and how it makes you become, right? Then I always say, then you don't need to be reminded
It's true.
because
Yeah.
yeah. So
Mhm,
the key is interest.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
always tell people, it's like, if you force something, it's never going to stick. But I always say, like, it's very easy to translate into relationships, right? Human relationships.
mhm,
So I
mhm,
always say, it's like, say, imagine that you're at a party and then you meet someone that, you're completely bored with, right? Your eyes are wandering everywhere. You can't wait for that conversation to end. And you have to be kind of forced to kind of meet that person again. But suppose you meet someone who's captivating, right? Who has maybe well traveled, maybe has similar interests, speaks the same language. You don't want that conversation to end. And you can't take your eyes off that person, right? And you can't wait to meet again. So, the same thing, you're building a
mhm.
relationship with your own self, your own body, your own breath, your own mind. So, when you fall in love with those states, like I love that feeling of being centered and grounded, right? And I know that a few minutes of asana practice, some breathing practice can get me there, a little bit of chanting. So I want that. That's how I can't imagine not having that or living life, I know how it is to be ungrounded and I know how it is to not have these practices.
Mhm.
So I don't need to be forced to do it. I just want want that. Right. So I always say
Right, right.
love is the
Yeah.
answer to everything. Fall in love.
Love is the answer. Yeah, very simple. Yeah, it's very simple.
Because it breeds interest,
I
it
like
breeds
that.
curiosity, right? Then you're interested, oh wow,
Yeah,
that my breath and my mind is connected. How does that work?
sure.
Right? So stay interested, stay curious.
Right,
And I
right,
say,
right. And you
yes, and
continue
you
to
continue
grow.
to
Mhm,
learn things
mhm.
about yourself. I always say, we are like scientists, right? And what we are researching
Mhm.
is our own self, our own body, our own breath, our own mind, and whatever else. So when you talk about the self in Vedanta, there's, Satchit, Ananda, all of that. But before that, it is from the known that you bridge the gap. So first we have to know what it is that we have. And what we have is the body, the breath, and the mind. And so we bring our attention to that, work with that, understand that, fall in love with that, and then it'll take us to other dimensions that at this point maybe we're not so connected with.
Speaking of connections, you have your studio, then you've written a book and multiple books and writing. How did you become a television host? How did that happen? And what is your process for producing that show?
I just had the opportunity. So I had friends in, like I said, I had started teaching online classes in the UK. And I had
Okay.
friends there who knew of this channel who were looking to have, because yoga became really popular during the COVID times, right? There was a lot of talk
Yes,
about
yes.
the pranayama practices, asana practices. So people, I think, also had the time because they were at home, and so they wanted to
Mhm.
introduce a yoga channel. And they just so like I had these friends in the UK who knew this person, and they recommended me, and yeah, so that happened. And before that, I already have a YouTube channel,
Oh, okay.
so I was already making these videos for YouTube, and I also, talk to. I have a podcast as well where I talk to, yoga teachers and people interested in basically Indian
Mhm.
sciences like Ayurveda, Vedanta, all of that.
Sure.
Yeah, that was something that was really interesting. It's just, and to me, there's just different mediums to communicate my passion. So
Yes.
whether it is speaking
Right.
or whether it
Right.
is the book or whether it is a television show, it gave me the chance to showcase the style of yoga that I teach, which is bringing the mind and philosophy into the class. So that was just another great. So
Uh-huh.
I just try to take every opportunity that comes. That's it.
Okay. Everything just flows with you. I'm just like, oh, yeah, I'm doing it. And probably part of it is just that knowing and grounding in being with yourself. So I like that. So that brings me to a good this is a good point to ask you about mindset hacks. And so this is where I ask, what is your favorite or few innovative mindset hacks, ones that you know or ones that you can imagine?
Yeah. So we spoke about this earlier, which is why I'm starting with it, which is the mantra,
Mm,
right? So mantras are actually beautiful vibrations. But every word, basically, to understand that every word carries a vibration. And you just tell somebody, "Shut up,"
mm-hmm,
right? That has a certain vibration.
mm-hmm,
But then you tell someone, right, "I love
mm-hmm,
you," right, and that has another vibration to it. So to understand that mantras are just words that carry a vibration, right? So when we and also if we understand the meaning, then it becomes hugely empowering. So for me, all of these practices are to empower ourselves.
mm-hmm,
Yeah. So there's a beautiful mantra called Aham Sa. So it can also is
mm-hmm,
chanted as Soham, but I like the Aham Sa because Aham stands for I am.
mm-hmm,
Yeah, and Sa stands for that. So to me, this is such a empowering phrase because a lot of the times we feel lonely, we feel weak because we feel we are limited, right? We only think of ourselves as the body and the race and the religion, and we limit ourselves to that. But when we repeat this mantra Ahamsa, we find that we remind ourselves of our connection to the universe, that we are part of that, and that stands for that universal consciousness. So each time we mindfully repeat that phrase, we are reminding ourselves that we are not these limited beings that we kind of think we are, and we are so much more than that. We are the part of the universe. And there is a beautiful visualization as well that I teach with that, where the wave and the ocean. Yeah. So when you say aham, I am, it is like that wave rising from the ocean. Yeah, that is each one of us as we are born. And then as as not just as you exhale, but even as we end our journey in this lifetime, we merge back with that universal consciousness, right? Like how the wave merges back with the ocean.
mm-hmm,
And that is really beautiful because through that example of the wave in the ocean, we understand that the waveness of the wave or the waters of the wave is not different from the waters of the ocean, and that we are so much more than we even know or we believe ourselves to be. So it gives us that capacity to believe in the magic,
mm-hmm,
to believe in all possibilities. Because sometimes we get drained, right? Like I said, life can deal us, heavy blows, and we need to pick ourselves up. And this is really like neuroplasticity. It's like rewiring our brain by consciously putting in all of this positive stuff. So mantras are, to me, a beautiful way, especially this particular one of ahamsa and visualizing the wave in the ocean, because that way we understand. Right? It's so easy to understand that the nature of the wave and the elements of the wave are not different from that of the ocean.
mm-hmm, mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in that way, we understand that we are also part of that that universal consciousness, and we're not different from that. Then I have some other hacks, as in yoga class, right? I'm just telling because it's just easy for me to relate with class because I'm always teaching,
Mm-hmm.
right? So the tendency is always, like, especially if there are many students in class, the tendency is always to look at other people and see what other people can do, and then feel terrible that you can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Right? So my constant refrain in class, which again I imbibed this from my teacher as well, Manoj Kaimal, is focus on what you can do.
Mm-hmm.
Right? A lot of the times we have these, and this can translate into life as well. Right? We have these big dreams. We see people who are big achievers, and then maybe we're not there yet, and then we get very disheartened. But if we just the work is to just consciously every day focus on what we can do and do that well. And then from what I have seen in my life, though it may have taken some time, it's just that one thing flows into the other.
Mm-hmm.
But for that flow to happen, you have to do whatever is your task today, you have to do that well, because that is what you are called upon today.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So the constant refrain in my yoga class as well is focus on what you can do.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah, because if we focus on what we can't, we give up.
Exactly. It's the same as I'm depressed or I'm, sad today, but you can
Yeah,
be something else.
yeah.
So,
So
yeah,
to
I like
shift
that.
your focus,
Okay.
and then everybody keeps
Yes.
talking. So when we said shift our focus, that just led me to another. Really, to me, I feel this is a very important one because it's constantly on Facebook. Let go, right? Just let it go, right?
Mm,
But how do
hmm
you let it go?
hmm
Nobody tells you that.
Right, right, right. Yeah.
And the more there is something that is stressful in your life that you need to let go, and the more you're going to be obsessively, compulsively thinking about it, right? When we
It's
have a
true.
particular stress in
Hmm
our life, whether it is a job stress, whether it is a relationship stress, that consumes our mind, right? Like a broken tape recorder, we're just
hmm
listening to that, to those thoughts in our head or the voices in our head continuously because that takes over. So, how do we let it go? And then you have these well meaning people and friends telling you, just let it go. But what I have learned through the yoga practice is that it teaches you to work with your attention.
Mm, mhm,
So, the magic or the secret to letting go is to consciously shift your focus.
mhm, mhm, mhm,
So this begins right in the beginning of yoga class. So when my students come into class and close their eyes, the first thing that they are asked to do is to be conscious of the mind. So you learn to separate your mind from you. Usually we are just flowing with the mind. We are the mind. But when
mhm,
you can
mhm.
objectively look at your mind in that non-judgmental manner and learn to direct it, right? Then you gain some semblance. Control is a strong word, but you at least learn to work with your mind. I look at it as this constant working relationship that you're trying to establish with the mind.
Right,
Yeah.
right.
So you get your mind, focus on your right big toe, focus on your sit bone, focus on your spine, right? All of that gives the control back to us. Otherwise,
Yeah.
we are always, I say, slaves of the mind, right? Because the mind just jerks us around. It gets happy, it gets sad, it gets depressed, it gets panicked, and we're just flowing along for the ride,
Mhm,
right? So in the Indian scriptures, they talk about the inner components of the mind, where you have the mind, which is the manas, and there is also the higher mind, which is considered the buddhi or the intellect. Yeah, so that is the path that we are trying to strengthen through the yoga practice. And to explain this, I give the very easy example of sugar, right? You see sugar, you like sugar, mind wants to eat sugar.
mhm.
But then there is this voice in your head, the intellect that tells you, okay, that's not so great for you. That's going to increase your inflammation.
Right.
Not to mention, yeah, so we can see this in our minds. There are these, there is the mind and there is the intellect.
Yeah.
So the whole practice of yoga is to align with the intellect. And when the intellect gets strong enough through these practices that we do every day, move the mind to the right big toe, move the mind to your sit bones, move the mind to your spine, move the mind to your right shoulder, to your left shoulder, right? When that practice gets strong enough, then when everyday life hits us and you find the mind, going into a spin, we have the capacity to direct the mind, to focus on something else, to
Mhm,
choose another point of focus because we have honed this skill in our yoga class, right? Because that's what the yoga class is all about. Focus on your body, focus on your breath, right? And we bring that same skill into life.
right. Makes sense. As you were saying that, I was just thinking as a visualizations because the ocean visualization was very effective. I think that works really well. But I just thought, and you said higher mind and that kind of thing. But I just thought, I think just projecting yourself outside of yourself at times and looking back at who you are, like really literally like looking down on yourself or whatever the situation is. I think that's probably also an effective
Yeah,
way of,
yeah,
okay,
yeah.
taking yourself
True.
outside of wherever you are to
The
then
thing
be.
is to not get consumed,
Mhm. Mhm.
right? When we have stress, we get consumed. That's all we think about. We go to bed thinking about it. We wake up thinking about it, right? So when we can take ourselves out of the situation, right, which is what you were
Mhm.
describing, right? When we can just look at ourselves with an objective manner, that already puts some distance, right? And distance is the key. When we have some distance, we can be objective.
Yes. Yes, indeed, indeed. Wow. So this has been so insightful. I could talk to you for forever, just because there's so many nuggets of wisdom. Because I love all of this. But I think our listeners can definitely get more of this in your current book,
Yeah,
right? As well as your forthcoming
yeah.
offerings. But so let's take a little pivot because we also want to know who you are when you're not being a yoga teacher or a TV host or a writer. What kind of things do you read and watch and listen to in your own
My
downtime?
mind is totally oriented towards all of this. So the
Okay, I
mind
get
and the
it.
brain fascinate me.
Uh-huh.
So I'm always like I like Deepak Chopra, and I like his books because he also blends in spirituality with science.
Yes, very
And
true.
he has many interesting books like I have learned from, which is like, the he has these super genes, super brain, right? All of
Mhm.
that, which helps. I
Mhm.
love this whole concept of neuroplasticity, because yoga in one way is really about neuroplasticity, about putting in, right, positive thoughts in your head, not being totally enslaved by the mind.
Yeah.
So I love Deepak Chopra's books. He's one author that I read and follow. And I also like, I'm very interested in health and nutrition. So I like Dr.
Mhm.
Mark Hyman. I follow him as well. Yeah. And like I said, I'm fascinated by the brain. So there's also Dr. Daniel Amen, who I follow. I think he has the Amen clinics there. So I
Mhm,
get
mhm,
a lot of
mhm.
nuggets of. It's very interesting to me also, where science is somehow I feel they're all speaking the same language,
Yes.
but just in different ways. So for me, it's always very interesting to see how they blend in together. And I think Dr. Mark Hyman himself has got a yoga background. And Dr. Amen also
Mhm.
talks very interestingly, like what I was telling you about the mind. He also talks a lot like that. And he was talking about how you can actually give your mind another name, and so that you can separate. Like that was one of his hacks, so that you can,
Right.
which I thought was
Yeah, so
very
you could make
interesting.
the
Yeah.
distinction. Yeah.
So, which I thought was very interesting, right?
Yeah.
Because this is what Vedanta is telling you as well. You are not the body, you are not the mind. So, it's very interesting for me
Yeah.
to see
Yeah.
how science and, philosophy is all blending and actually speaking the same thing, but they just have different languages.
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
Yeah. So, I like Dr. Daniel Amen. And I also like Dr. Michael Beckwith. I think I listen to a lot of his podcasts as
Okay.
well. Yeah, and Dr.
Okay.
Joe Dispenza, Abraham Hicks. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, because it's very interesting that ultimately they're all also working with the mind.
Yes.
It's all about the mind, right? I mean, bring your mind
Right.
to the present, right? Work with what you have in the present, right? Lift your mind in the current moment. It's all the mind. And that's what the yoga practice is about.
It's the control
Yeah,
center, from an energetic perspective. So that's what I kind of appreciate about the
yeah,
science. It takes you into the science of what that
yeah,
energy is that is able to move and
yeah,
maneuver and
yeah.
spark
And then
different.
also they talk
Yeah.
about the
Yeah.
hormones and all of that, right? About how feel good hormones are released, how the mind and body is connected. That is so
Mhm.
fascinating, right? We don't
Mhm.
realize it, but every single thought in our head releases a corresponding hormone. So if we are constantly having stressful thoughts,
Mhm.
then that's all going to reflect in the body. And today, I think even science agrees that some more than 90% of that figure can vary, but majority of all illnesses have their roots in stress. So I think it is so
Mhm.
imperative that and where is stress? Stress is all in the mind, right? So it comes
Mhm.
back to learning to manage your mind
Mhm. Mhm. Mhm.
and establishing a good working relationship with it.
Yes, yes. I think you said something that's key, that this kind of understanding of the self is core to existence. And we're finding that we're teaching English, math, science, those types of things, but we are
Absolutely.
missing a big piece by not adding this to
Absolutely.
curriculums. Do you do you see yourself being an advocate, and if or how would you see this becoming something that's more core to global curriculums? Because what I'm finding, particularly in trying to create content for children and families, is that I think the idea of what's just given is what so many of the masses take. And so in order to be able to make an impact, you almost have to kind of be doing some grassroots to get the parents to demand it, because I think that's part of the challenge of changing the system is if there's so many that don't demand anything different, we get the status quo.
Well, it's a very interesting thing that I have a class for children as well in my studio.
Mm-hmm.
And most of the children, all their parents come to yoga class.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel once parents get the benefit, once
Yeah.
you feel the
Mm-hmm.
benefit, like to me, I feel like the biggest gift that I have given my children is really an awareness of all of this and an expanded mind to view life. Yeah, it's just a lens through which you view life.
Mm-hmm.
To me, really, once the parent experiences it, then they want their child to experience it. So, as more people find the benefit of the yoga practice, and I think conversations like this, and I do believe they should be more mainstream. Like, even in India, when I grew
Yeah.
up, there were absolutely no conversations like this.
Right.
And in fact, I myself started doing yoga, in a very serious manner only after I left India.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Mm-hmm.
and even though I think in many ways America has, upped it a bit because my niece was learning yoga in her kindergarten some 10, 15 years ago, where it was still not taught in India.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe now India has changed.
Mm-hmm.
But when I was growing up, there was absolutely no exposure to yoga in school.
Right.
So I believe this has to start young, and for parents' minds to change, more awareness of this has to come in and more such conversations are needed. This has to become like mainstream topic, right? But I think because of the explosion online, people who are interested, have
Yeah.
access if they want
Right.
to. Yeah,
They
they
can
can
find.
find. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Wow. So where can we find you? Where can we find your books? Where can we find your online courses? Tell us more.
So my books are available, I think, on Amazon. And
Yep.
yeah,
Mm-hmm.
so I have a YouTube channel. I'm also on Facebook. I also have an Instagram. So I'm quite
Okay.
accessible.
We'll put all of that on the
Yeah,
show notes.
yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'm quite available on social media and my online classes as well. I have a Gmail. If anybody can email me, then I can share the details of the classes. So yep.
Wonderful. Wonderful. I love how you're so easy. It's like very just holistic because it is your passion. So it just comes through. Like you can find me these places. I'm happy to be available to everyone. So we really appreciate that. And we will be sending having links to your book on Amazon and as well as your website and all those things. And we'll have good show notes as well, because a lot of the different teachers and practices that Shailaja mentioned, I will have those in the show notes and all of the books and things like that as usual. So before we go for today, do you have any last words for our listeners?
In my own journey, what I have found is that one of the most important words is faith. Yeah. So in yoga, there is the term Shraddha, right? Because without Shraddha or faith, that's when it's like that, we're walking this fine line, like on a cliff's edge. And without faith,
Mm-hmm.
we just fall into hopelessness, helplessness, having no optimism and, really being disheartened and depressed about the future. But as long as we have faith, we have the capacity to, move forward, just take another step, even if it's a really small step, or even just stay where we are and breathe. So this is something that I share, like, even with my son, and just think about. I contemplate a lot on this word faith. To keep the faith in life, in the universe, to believe that we live in a responsive universe and to believe that we are not here to
Mm-hmm.
just suffer and, good things can come and, to keep working on ourselves, keep our minds in a good place. The work
Mm-hmm.
is to, is all within. It's just to keep our minds in a good place and to keep the faith, to contemplate on
Yes.
faith and to keep
Yeah.
having faith.
Yeah, yeah, I like that. That's a very nice way to end the conversation. We'll leave it there. I feel very zen today.
Thank you so much.
It's been a long day. Yeah, thank you so much for joining us as well. So, this has been another episode of Glocal Citizens, folks. You can catch us each and every Tuesday with new episodes, www.glocalcitizenspod.com, and wherever you get your podcast. Be sure to check out the show notes once again, they will be very rich. And I guess that's all for this week. This is my last interview from Brooklyn. I leave very soon, so I'll be in sunny climates. I'm just looking forward to that. And we'll catch you on the other side, listeners. Bye for now.